Now we are looking at a Hibernate mapping XML. A Hibernate mapping XML uses a Hibernate mapping root element, and it has a class name equal to stockapp Hibernate user. We have already seen this class, but I am still opening it just so we will recognize it. User. This user class is after all a normal Java bean having all your 5 properties with some constructors and getters, setters. Getting back to the HPM XML, what we have is the mapping of the class to a table called users. We know what the users table is as well. Go to MySQL, say DESC users, and you will see that this users table also has 5 columns. Coming back to your mapping XML, we have a statement which usually is used in every mapping XML. We have a user ID column, which is the primary key, and I am saying generator class equal to assigned. This could change to sequence in the case of an Oracle sequence, or native. There are a few combinations that are used here. We are using assigned because we are assigning the value to this column. That's pretty much all there is to it. Password, first name, last name, balance, pretty self-evident. So it's a pretty straightforward HPM XML. Alright, so we have seen the XML, we have seen the table, we have seen the user class, and it's pretty self-evident that Hibernate works pretty straightforward in cases like this. Now we switch to user DAO, and user DAO basically has the Hibernate template set up already when it is called, and we have the save or update method, which basically is called through a Hibernate template.execute callback, and it does the save. Alright, okay, now we come back to some of the other classes and JSPs. We have gone through the register process class, wherein we accept all the request parameters and call the user DAO method and save or update. Alright, let us view some of the other classes. ByStocks class pretty much does the same thing, except it does nothing at all. We have the result class, same thing. Alright, now there is a correlation between these Java classes, the names, versus these JSPs. So you can see that ByStocks.java relates to ByStocks.jsp, and registerProcess.java has a correlation with registerProcess.jsp. Alright, this is not enforced by Spring. This is an architecture that is in place for this particular application, because having this kind of convention makes it really easy for us to do some coding. Now we will run back to Spring App Controller, and you are in a good position to understand what is happening here. And just before that, I want to open up one particular page called Startup Beans page, XML called Startup Beans, and show you some definitions here. So what we have as definitions here is, we saw this user DAO definition. We also have a result, a ByStocks, and a register process. These are also defined here. Alright, now we will go through Spring App Controller. Navigate, open resource, Spring App Controller. Alright. Context.getBean of redirect. Now your redirect parameter could be register, register process, ByStocks, any of these names. And what this guy does is basically gets a bean of the same name, and those bean definitions we just saw here in Startup Beans. These are the bean definitions. Alright, so it gets a bean of that name and puts it as a view object. That is why we have to implement this interface. All of these objects are implementing the same interface, and we have a code which says if view not equal to null, view.buildContent. So it will call the particular object. So this is actually polymorphism. When an interface implements multiple classes, and depending on the kind of object you call that particular object's method, it is called polymorphism. Alright, so this guy will run the build content method of register process if the object that it gets through Spring is register process, and that will happen if your redirect parameter is register process. It will run the build content method of buy stocks if your redirect is called buy stocks, and so forth. Okay, so you got a beautiful example of how polymorphism works. After it builds the content, all it does is basically get the JSP and it forwards the request. So that's pretty straightforward.